will be made available to all attendees roughly 24 hours following the conclusion of today's presentation. I would encourage all folks out there, if you're not already, to give us a follow on social media. Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter are all great places to keep up with the latest and greatest news, announcements, promotions, giveaways, and more from Unitrends to our community. And lastly, as the title suggests, there is a prize for some lucky attendees today. All attendees have been entered, will be entered into a raffle. We have 5 $100 Amazon gift card prizes, so keep an eye out in your on your email inbox following the conclusion of the presentation. And a couple of lucky attendees will be notified and receive their electronic prize for redemption. So now with those details out of the way here, let's kind of jump right in and get started. And before we dig into kind of the root of the issue or the problems here, I wanted to take a moment to introduce the company for anyone that might be joining us for the first time. Unitrends is a data backup and disaster recovery technology. We've been around for 30 years. We actually celebrated our 30th anniversary last month. Originally founded protecting Unix systems for healthcare clients in the late 80s. So a little bit of trivia for you if you were wondering where the Uni had come from. Now today, 3 decades later, over 30,000 customers across the globe trust Unitrends for their data protection and disaster recovery needs. With a combination of our hardware and software solutions, we're protecting well over 2 exabytes of customer data locally on their premises, and with the Unitrends Cloud, a proprietary, manufacturer's managed and operated solution, we have over 100 petabytes of customer data that we are saving for long-term retention, as well as those machines that are enrolled in our white glove disaster recovery as a service. Really backing and supporting everything that we do is the customer support organization here at Unitrends. It's a little something of an obsession with us here. We maintain a 98% customer satisfaction rating. It's a metric and analysis that goes on a daily basis. That's not a stat that we cherry-picked from our best month a couple of years ago. And you can see down the bottom there are a couple of the Stevie Awards that we won this year for customer service. They're an absolutely fantastic organization. They're based right here in the U.S. and they're available to our community 24/7 by 365. Again, something that we place a tremendous amount of both investment and pride in. Those folks really supporting our community of users. So when it comes to what we've been striving to fight against, ultimately it is downtime. And kind of, I guess, curiously enough, a lot of those headline making events, significant hurricanes, natural disasters, ransomware, while they do represent some of the most severe downtime incidents in terms of both their impact and response, they're not the most common that we see. Natural disasters making up only about 4% of all downtime events. Much more commonly, we see things like human error and software issues that are derailing potentially recoveries or production environments at the cost of our employees. And when we look at the overall cost of downtime, and Gartner has estimated that for organizations that could be as high as almost $9,000 per minute, we're taking into account more than just an organization's inability to transact when systems are unavailable. But we also have the impact of employee productivity that is lost while the tools and the applications that they need to conduct their day-to-day businesses are down. We also have the costs of recovery. Again, those may vary depending on what the impact looks like. That innocuous, human error, accidental deletion may be less costly than something, again, like a significant ransomware attack or natural disaster. But regardless of what the outage or the incident looks like, here at Unitrends, we want to readily enable our customers to respond to really any severity of threat by equipping them with the tools to recover granular items seamlessly, restore their physical clients, virtual machines, applications, even have strategies for failover of their entire site. And I think that that's important, having a number of different ways in which we can recover and ways to be able to meet more aggressive RTOs, because we've seen an increased demand from the business units that we're serving in terms of uptime. Organizations very, very much so are increasing the service availability goals of the mission-critical or business-critical applications, especially over the last 3 years. 5 nines of availability leaves very, very little room for IT error. Even if you're striving to achieve that 4 nines of availability, you've left yourself a window for 4 minutes per month of unplanned downtime. And based on some of those Gartner costs, that can still represent represent fairly significant risk, but I think that naturally we've kind of prioritized the systems that we are protecting from mission critical to business critical to kind of those business important or those business operation machines, that tier 1, 2, and 3, kind of understanding what that looks like, what needs to be brought up first, and what's most important to our organization in terms of maintaining that uptime or that availability. But we certainly recognize that you as IT professionals are being tasked with more work, more risk, more projects, and that shrinking tolerance for downtime. And in a lot of cases, it's coincided with a reduction in budget on things like capital expenditures. We've seen an increased demand on application services, application availability, and is that coming potentially at the expense of the tools and the hardware that we need in the data center to make that a reality? Ultimately, we've seen, challenges when it comes to meeting some of these goals. The top three, insufficient IT resources. We're being tasked with less manpower, and we ultimately are dealing with a deluge and exponential growth of data, increasing demands of that application uptime, and more of a shift in focus in application services. Budgetary limitations are certainly causing a factor here as well. And when we look at where the data is now residing and how we're delivering these workloads, whether they reside on-premise or you've started to shift to maybe software as a service or infrastructure as a service, delivery through the public clouds, we've seen in some cases that lack of in-house expertise impacting the overall ability of an organization or an IT staff to be able to protect data. Ultimately, what we've seen kind of trends here across the industry is that there's still a significant portion of data in the data center that is going unprotected, and even more so in some of those remote or those branch office environments. So we've certainly seen folks at times that are struggling with some of today's challenges to maintain or meet the goals which they are being asked of or which they are being demanded. We conduct here at Unitrends, our senior product marketing folks conduct an annual survey on the state of cloud data protection, disaster recovery as a service, and a significant minority of organizations last year, from the spring of 2018 to the spring of 2019 here, have experienced a downtime, 42% unplanned system downtime. With the demands of uptime and availability from our business units, we still think that this is a really high rate. Potentially, I don't want to say it's unacceptable, because we recognize that there are certainly challenges in doing so, but still with the technology available in the marketplace today, we still think that this is too high in a lot of cases. But we've seen some of those same challenges, even from our surveys, comparing that with industry results, that are kind of resonating here. Again, those declining budgets and headcount, the increasing complexity and the distribution of those workloads, all creating challenges in maintaining that uptime. Ultimately, as well, we're seeing that the loss of data from these events remains unacceptably high. And we're kind of looking at things here. We want to make sure that we're looking at things kind of in respectively. Systems downtime from, again, those numbers from Gartner, on average $9,000 per minute. In a study last year by Dell EMC, they were evaluating over 2,000 organizations across the globe, a mix of industry verticals and industry sizes. And overall, what they had found that with the increased monetization of data today and how we're using it to drive analytics, new product development, market penetration and segmentation, proactively respond to existing customers and provide that proactive CSAT experience, the impact of data loss versus a systems outage is almost 2 times as high. So when we look at, steadily over the last 4 years, still a robust, a third of respondents in our survey that are still losing that data. It can have, in some cases, even more of an impact from a financial standpoint to an organization, because that IP and that data has really become the lifeblood of our businesses today. In the words of Dick Sappler, our Senior Product Marketing Manager, data loss still remains unacceptably high in his view. So at this point, and for attendees here, this is anonymous. We're not going to be blasting these results out, but I would like to kind of gauge what things have been looking like for our respondents and for the folks that have been able to join us today. So if you'd be willing to submit a quick poll response, we are curious, how have recoveries been going for you in the last 12 months? When you look back at kind of how uptime and productivity has been across your organization? Have there been significant outages from which you've needed to recover? Have you been successful in those endeavors? I'll give folks about a minute or so here to complete the poll. We really appreciate your responses. And again, just looking to gauge, based on some of those industry trends, what does our audience today look like, and are what you folks are experiencing out there kind of resonating with what we've seen kind of across the industry from a trend perspective? So again, I'll give this another 30 seconds or so. We really appreciate participation. All right, excellent. Thank you everyone who did participate. Going to keep things moving here, so we are going to close the poll at this time, but I did want to share the results from folks. Luckily, and I think fortunately, about 35% of our attendees today did not have any system failures or that unplanned outage, or they only had successful recoveries. A smaller minority, about 14% of our respondents here today, had one or more recovery failures. We're going to look and explore some of the potential causes or impacts that there may be. And a small percentage of folks said that they don't have the ability to recover from failure. So hopefully we'll provide you with some information, and I think you've come to the right place if this is something or an area where potentially you are struggling today. So let me close this out of the way so that we can keep moving here. Let's take a look here. So when we look at software compatibility issues, and this again is going to be our primary focus today, the first in our series was kind of looking at that hidden risks checklist, and I'm going to provide a link to that white paper at the end of the presentation. I would strongly encourage folks to check that out and just make sure that kind of your strategies and your practices today are aligning with some of these. And I think for a lot of folks where we haven't seen those outages or those impacts, certainly sounds like you've got a robust strategy in place and have checked off a lot of those boxes. But again, I'll share that with folks as we move on here. One of the most common causes, and something that we see an awful lot, are VSS issues, that volume shadow copy service that a lot of your backup solutions today, especially when you're performing those agent-based backups, respond to. The VSS writers are responsible for the quick quiescence and capturing of that data to create either the snapshots or the backup files. But especially when we look at different applications such as AD, Microsoft, SQL, Exchange Server that are heavily database driven, we're seeing a mix of VSS writers, and on average, most servers have 10 to 15 of these installed, and typically your backup solutions are going to be reliant on those VSS writers to receive and quiesce that data. This snapshot here from online was just a short list. There are 30 plus different VSS writers that could be in use depending on the application and the OS of particular clients or servers. When we see issues with VSS writers, there could be a couple of things at play here. The first, that being multiple backup applications. When you're having struggling with something like the truncation of logs, or trying to correctly truncate and back up those transaction logs for the database, if you've got multiple DPUs, multiple backup solutions that might be competing for those logs, you run the risk of running into errors, corruption, or even having those logs be completely empty, which would impact the ability to restore the database. Backups failing because the agent's VSS writers are in a failed state, but it may not be possible at times to restart that server, kind of shut it down and bring it back up gracefully during business hours, would the impact to productivity be significantly high or too much of an error there? Issues in where writers would not be running, they might be stalled, or that command there, the VSS admin list, will only show those writers in its started mode. But you also want to make sure, as always, that you're applying the latest version or patch updates and making sure that you're staying up to date with the releases from your OS or application providers. In a lot of cases, Microsoft here, but certainly a common issue when it comes to recoveries or errors in backups, especially when you've got those multiple DPUs that might be competing for some of the same files, causing that corruption or ultimately empty log files where we're failing or we wouldn't have successful backups at that time. In fixing VSS errors and kind of troubleshooting those, some of the more common tips or tips might be, the disabling all but one backup application. Have you been able to potentially reduce the overall complexity of the environment by finding a solution that can protect all of your physical clients, your virtual machines, the application-specific data and those DBs as well, and your storage objects? With Unitrends, you do have that all-in-one solution. Our local appliances, whether they are physical or virtual, have compatibility for over 250 operating systems, hypervisors, and applications. So in a lot of cases, we've been able to help customers consolidate multiple point products, different GUIs, and really streamline some of that infrastructure and ultimately reduce some of the complexity that they're managing on-premise and in some cases overcoming what we would consider those low-value IT tasks, that day-to-day tuning and management of the service. You could restart the VSS copy service from the services console. You could reboot that server, graceful shutdown, and bring it back up when it's possible to do so. But as we've seen, that might not always be a realistic solution during key business hours. You could also leverage Microsoft support for available hotfixes for VSS, or you could start to use or transition over to a backup appliance that will automatically identify VSS issues and work to remediate them. That's something that we are working on here at Unitrends, the ability to build out more of a repository, if I will, or a library of some of those common issues, and when those symptoms or conditions are met or noticed, the software will automatically either restart the writers, disable or shut down the backup process, and restart that backup. Continue to follow along with our Reasons Recoveries Fail series for additional information. I can only provide you with a short teaser at this time, but the ability to start implementing machine learning and proactively and automatically identify those issues and perform corrections without manual intervention of IT is something that very soon is going to be a reality here. When we look at one of the most important pieces of our infrastructure, especially for those Windows environment, it is going to be Active Directory and those domain controllers, as I'm sure most of you, if not all of you know, authenticate and authorize the users and the clients within your domain. But Active Directory, as it's being backed up, it's going to be backed up as part of system state, a collection of components that all have dependencies on each other. You have to be backing up and restoring those system states components together. Could be things like the boot files and the system startup, the registry there, class registration database for component services, the sysvol information, and some of those databases, the NTDS Active Directory database, checkpoint files, those transaction logs as well. So a good backup, as recommended or provided by Microsoft, includes at a minimum the system state and the contents of the system's disk. But it's not always a straightforward restore procedure depending on the outage. When you look at issues when it comes to software errors or data loss or corruption, typically Microsoft is going to recommend a non-authoritative restore. It's going to be their default method or recommendation for restoring AD services. That non-authoritative restore, is going to restore the domain controller to its state at the time of backup, and then the domain controller will query its replication partners or the other controllers within the AD environment, allowing normal replication to overwrite that system state with changes that have occurred after the last backup was taken. So it will bring that version or that DC state current as far as the data that's been received on those replication partners. So you can restore that domain controller, and again, in most situations that result from data loss or corruption, you'll be leveraging that non-authoritative restore. When human error is involved, such as accidental deletion or changes that shouldn't have been made have been started to replicate to the other domain controllers within the environment, and you can't easily recreate these objects, Microsoft will recommend performing an authoritative restore. That's not going to overwrite the new objects that have been created after the backup has been taken, so they recommend restoring the smallest unit necessary. For example, don't restore the entire directory in order to restore a single subtree. But in addition to the Active Directory components and recovering AD itself, think as well from a recovery standpoint, where are there dependencies on Active Directory, and are we bringing up the machines in the right order? When we talk about the interoperability and dependencies of the clients within our network, ultimately to bring those applications to our users, where there are dependencies in restore, this may seem kind of obvious here, you want to make sure where there are those AD dependencies, you're bringing AD or restoring that back up first and then coming in and restoring the other components that rely on it. We want to make sure first and foremost that the other clients that we're restoring are going to have that link to the AD server and be able to authenticate and authorize that client communication. When we look at the increased virtual environments as well, production VM disk configurations can also present potentially issues. The snapshots, which are not backups, we're going to talk about where the differences lie there. They're stored on native drives that are used in recovery, but the configuration of the virtual disks needed for backup has to be done carefully there. If both disks that are needed for backup are backed up in or are provisioned in independent mode, neither disk has the ability to be snapshotted, and those backups will ultimately be empty. Certain configurations, such as shielded VMs, shared disks, may present potential configuration issues and may cause those unexpected crashes or restarts if configured incorrectly. So you want to make sure that you're following hypervisor best practices, and also making sure to check your backup solutions for their compatibility, especially when it comes to things like the CBT drivers, making sure that things are configured in a way that will allow us to restore them. Make sure that you're following the VMware, Hyper-V, AHV best practices for configuring the virtual environment, and also kind of checking that against your backup provider's best practices to ensure that we're not going to run into potential issues down the road when it comes to restoration. You know, and snapshots, as we had mentioned, are not by themselves backups. Snapshots are a mechanism that are provided by the hypervisor to record those delta changes from a certain point in time. Files that are put in place to make the snapshots a reality exist and live on the same storage infrastructure as those parent disks, so they are dependent on the same array as that production data. When we're thinking about backups, we want the backups to be completely autonomous from the virtual machine or the virtual environment that we're protecting. The delta disks that are created as a part of the snapshot process are not autonomous. They have dependencies on the physical infrastructure and or the virtual infrastructure of the VM. So since they are dependent on the parent VM disks and that chain of snapshots, if the base disks were ever deleted, the snapshots in and of themselves are not enough to restore a virtual machine. That's where we come in and recommend leveraging those backups that are taken and going to be stored. You can enable change block tracking here so that information is safely collected without that need or the dependencies on the parent VM or the production storage. Snapshots are also, those hypervisor native snapshots are not meant to exist long term. With VMware, Hyper-V, they will continue to grow in storage. VMware recommends don't use a snapshot for more than 72 hours. They typically recommend 24 to 72 hours for the life of that snapshot. And you can certainly leverage it to roll back point in time for things like QA testing, patch testing, DevOps. But as that snapshot is being retained, the file size is continuing to grow over time. And as that continues to get larger, you run the risk of impacting the storage location space overall and system performance. So when we think about backups, again, they're autonomous copies of the data and the virtual machine files that do not depend on the physical or the virtual infrastructure that's in place to be able to restore the data. They enable the recreation of a VM without any reliance on the source machine or files. Today's backup infrastructure and Unitrends technology not only enables us to have that autonomous backup, but also to replicate virtual machines so that we can get those backup copies stored off-site. With your plain or your standard virtual machine backups, that's not going to be possible. Now, with all that being said, most of your modern backup technologies do leverage the VM snapshots to copy data, but they don't rely on the snapshots remaining in place. The VM snapshot will allow the backup software to quickly quiesce the disk, grab that data from the virtual machine, and then those temporary snapshots are deleted and cleaned off of the storage repo once the backup cycle has been completed. And the backups themselves are an essential part of business continuity. They are what enable recovery time and recovery point objectives to be met. Snapshots alone and in and of themselves do not ensure those critical objectives, and environments that might rely only on snapshots as a mean for backup is really asking for trouble, asking for disaster and data loss. You want to be making sure that you're using a combination of the two at a minimum. But again, those clean backups and then getting that information off-site or that copy of that data off-site is really a key best practice. You don't have that same reliance on the production array to guard against something more significant like host or site-level failure. So when we talk about solutions for some of these problems, the AD dependencies, the VSS writers, I know we teased that, snapshots and backups, let's kind of take a look at what we would recommend here. And firstly, as we had mentioned, when you run into or you've got multiple products in the environment, do you run into issues with multiple DPUs that are competing for the same sources of data? You can eliminate some of those challenges by leveraging a single backup and recovery solution. You're reducing some of those gaps between coverage. You are reducing some of the burden of what we would consider low-value IT tasks, the day-to-day tuning and management of the systems, potential risks for interoperability, even just from a functionality standpoint, having to go in through different UIs, having separate maintenance contracts, support calls, support vendors, really increases some of that complexity, potentially finger-pointing in the environment. At Unitrends, we're striving to reduce that complexity and risk by providing our customers or enabling them with all-in-one simplicity. Again, that single appliance here, you're looking at one of our physical appliances, but the virtual appliances, well, have compatibility for over 250 applications, operating systems, and hypervisors. You can protect your physical clients on an agent basis, your virtual machines natively, your applications with that single appliance. You've got one vendor because we have provided that hyper-converged appliance. The compute, storage, the backup software itself, even the cloud environment potentially is all being managed and supported by a single vendor. You're not going to get, your software vendor pointing fingers at the secondary storage vendor because in the case of Unitrends, we are providing all of it and supporting all of it for our customers. And when we talk about the Unitrends cloud environment, some of the objections or the challenges that we've seen with customers looking to adopt cloud have been that lack of in-house expertise. They don't have an expert, there's not an expert in EC2 instances. How many instances do we need? Are we running the right instances in the right regions? Are they provisioned or throttled appropriately based on traffic? With the Unitrends cloud, we're managing that back-end environment for our customers. You've got full control still over the data. You can recover data from our cloud environment as needed, and there are no additional egress fees for that data retrieval. We try to make it very, very straightforward when it comes to enabling that cloud infrastructure. We'll also help our customers automate recovery testing down to the application level and report back on the results ultimately of those tests. But it's all being defined by you, the user, when you're enrolled in our service, and the testing's enabled on our local appliances as well. We're going to take a look at that in just a moment here. So what we would recommend is really kind of a new approach here. Again, today's infrastructure reality, data is slowly leaving the traditional data center. We are very close, and studies indicate that we will be creating more intellectual property outside of the traditional data center as soon as next year than we're creating inside of it. We've seen an increase in remote and remote and mobile workforce, increased rise in SaaS applications, dependencies on those multi-tiered or those end-tier applications, but still, even with additional complexities, additional platforms that are being introduced to the environment, still folks that are requiring that global 24-hour protection. And as we had mentioned, beyond that scope of manual human intervention, looking to shift to that machine learning proactively and kind of without the intervention from IT, be able to intervene at the server level to remediate any issues that there may be with recovery. It's invisible, it's automated, it's proactive, and it's continuous. Again, all things that will be coming here from Unitrends to augment the solutions and the products that we have in place today. When we think about that advanced solution, this is kind of what we're talking about, the proactive monitoring of the backup and the recovery environment to identify proactively issues, determine the cause of failure before the backup has either been run or has been completed. Automating that remediation, again, we had kind of teased this here, the ability to restart the servers where appropriate, stop the backup process and restart the backup process without waiting for human intervention or admin approval, given that these remediation strategies are within predefined parameters. We're not going to be going in and intervening without your permission, but you'll kind of define those parameters and set what's most appropriate to help maintain the continuity overall of your environment and your solution. And the goal here is we're building out this library and this catalog as we seek to deliver this new functionality to folks very soon, is those working around those issues. The AI software should know enough and have enough of a library to identify those issues as well as how to resolve them. As we continue to encounter things, that's part of the machine learning process. We're continuing to coalesce that information and expand that library, so as we're coming across more issues, naturally building those in and then preventing them from being issues that will require manual intervention in the future. It's an ongoing kind of learning experience here as a part of the software that we're developing. We're also seeing, as we had mentioned earlier, really strict requirements and rigorous uptime requirements of the business units that we are serving. RPOs and RTOs are starting to diminish to zero. When did we need that client back up and running? Well, we needed it 5 minutes before it failed. There's really little tolerance for failure. Folks that are looking for near continuous or continuous data protection, and by leveraging this automation and machine learning, we're enabling these errors to be caught in advance, proactively identifying issues in the backup process or potentially with restore. We can fix and remediate these issues. We're texting against the backups and the fixes that we've made and can dispose of any bad files or potentially problematic errors before they slow down or have an impact on recovery. Recovery testing, if folks have listened to Unitrends before or you've been speaking with us, recovery testing is a huge part of what we do and something that we enable our users to do in an automated fashion. In a lot of cases, when folks aren't able to test as frequently as they would like to be or as frequently as they know that they should be, there have been some of the same limitations that we've seen, lack of manpower or budgetary restrictions. At Unitrends, we don't want those errors to really be a reality for folks. We're striving to enable you with automation, and not just from a screenshot verification standpoint, actually going in and testing the underlying data and the underlying applications to identify or proactively remediate issues. That's where data copy access comes in. Data copy access is one of my favorite features and one of the features that our customers tell us absolutely they loved and really was what convinced them that Unitrends would be the solution for them. Some of the recovery testing that is now enabled by data copy access is technology that we've been leveraging as a part of our disaster recovery as a service, but as we were sending both the compliance and the results of the application level tests to our customers that were enrolled in the service, they said, Unitrends, we absolutely love this information. We would love the ability to perform these tests locally, so we delivered it to our community in our 10.0 release. So what you're looking at here is the configured dashboard of a Unitrends appliance. The appliances are fairly straightforward to stand up. As they come pre-configured and pre-tuned with the software, the compute, and the storage, you're going to put it in your rack, plug it in, connect it to your network, and then use DHCP or DNS to give it an IP address. Once it has its IP, you access our web UI by submitting the address into your Chrome or Firefox browser. It's an HTML-based dashboard that we're working with here, and it's all tile-based, so you can drag and drop and customize the view to put the most important information for you front and center and adjust those preferences and what those views look like to really customize to your needs and to your environment. Over on the left here are the key tabs for appliance configuration, reporting here, and then scheduling out our backup jobs, replication, performing recovery operations as well. Our system-wide alerts are up here. Now, these alerts are available both through the UI dashboard. They can be configured to be emailed out to the administrators of your choosing. Our help menu here enables 24/7 by 365 access to our support organization. You can leverage our online help for 24/7 chat help, our community forums, and library of knowledge base articles. You can even open up a VPN tunnel and have a Unitrends support engineer log in remotely to and securely to your appliance, work through to review any error logs with you, and remediate or resolve any issues or errors that have occurred. You can initiate that communication right from your local UI here. Elsewhere on our dashboard, we've got a great summary of what's going on within our environment, the assets that we are protecting. These could be physical servers, virtual machines, the applications themselves, storage objects here, assets that we've identified or registered to our Unitrends environment, but have not taken a backup of in the last 7 days, errors that have occurred within our backups here, size, speed, utilization, restore summaries, replication, and recovery assurance. Again, front and center right here, hyperlinked into our reporting. I love to keep this front and center on my dashboard because it's a screenshot into the results of the application level testing as well as those compliance requirements. I'm going to share with you, and I'd love to show folks how straightforward and streamlined we've made this recovery scheduling and how it does differentiate from screenshot verification here. So from the Jobs tab where you would schedule out your backup jobs, your replication, configure SLA policies, you can also create that data copy access job. And data copy access is going to leverage the backups that we've already taken, the backups that are being stored on our appliance, to ultimately certify their performance. This testing here can be set up to run in an automated fashion. So once you've configured the DCA job, you let it run and check in on those reports. But again, it enables us to simulate that failover process. Let's take a look here. So from our catalog of backups, we're going to be testing some of our VMware host level backups or snapshots here. We have 3 machines that are going to be key to this test. The first is our Active Directory. The second here, we're going to grab our web server, and this web server is also reliant on this SQL host here. It's a back-end database. So once we've selected the backups of the machines that we want to test here, you come over, select Next, and you'll establish a lab profile. The profile is important because in addition to running the recovery testing, you can also use data copy access to spin up an isolated lab environment for things like patch testing, QA testing, DevOps work. You'll give the profile a custom name up at the top here, and because we're testing VMware backups, we're going to leverage a VMware host for testing. We'll select our target host. Resource pools where configured, the data store that we'll be leveraging here. Recovery, as we mentioned, in addition to the instant lab, this data copy access job can also be used for push-button failover of the clients that are enrolled in the job. So recovery here will be live to our VM network, but all of our testing will be within this sandbox network, an isolated network that we've stood up for these testing purposes. And we'll be testing backups off of our local ETH0 appliance here. When you configure the target location both for testing, the instant lab, and failover, you will also input the recovery point and the recovery time objectives in intervals of hours or minutes that we'll be testing against. You save that profile. We've got a number that have been created here. You can review the summary information of the target, the recovery assurance settings here, those compliance settings, RPO and RTO here. You'll come over to Next and create the schedule. You can elect to run these jobs on demand or create that custom schedule by determining the start date, Then, subsequently, the days of the week in which you want the job to run, you can toggle these on and off for customization here. Set a start time for running this testing job and up that recurrence in intervals of hours or minutes where more frequent testing may be required. Once the scheduling has been completed here, lastly, you will configure these tests. But again, we're enabling that application level testing. In addition to that, let's open up our AD machine and start configuring out these tests here. You can define things like the boot order of these machines. Again, we talked about some of those dependencies. We're going to leave AD in our first boot group. We want it to come up first here. You can reconfigure the CPU and the memory of these VMs, re-IP the VMs, and from the testing tab here is where you'll input those application level scripts. Now, we have over 50 preloaded scripts and tests that you can run, such as scanning drives and folders for malware, tests for different Exchange services and databases, Microsoft Windows services, and so forth. But you can also run your own custom scripting enabled here. For Active Directory, in this case, we're going to test that domain service and the domain database, the NTDS database, by executing this test here. So we add that into our testing. There's a priority 1 here. We're going to configure and save that for our AD machine. Secondly, here we're going to bring up our SQL host, and we're going to put this in our boot group of 2 and come over and configure a couple of tests for our SQL machine. In this case here, you could run queries with expected output, check the status of instances. In this case, we're going to test our WebDB service, make sure that the database that's the back end of our web server is operational and responding. We can also come in and configure a test for the Windows service. We're going to test the database engine here by inputting that MS SQL server and be executing to make sure that the database engine is running here as well. So we save that, and we'll come over and lastly configure our web server. We're going to put this and have it come up third in our boot order and configure a couple of tests for web. Firstly, we're going to run a test against IIS, make sure that we can publish and post the website here. And secondly, we're going to add in a ping test to ensure that it can communicate with that backend database by configuring to test for this host here, our Burlab SQL. So we've configured in our testing, configured the tests here, defined a boot order. And again, where necessary, you can re-IP the machines, reconfigure the CPU and the memory. Do you see how different this is than that screenshot verification where say, hey, we've turned the backup on, we've brought you to the login screen, but we haven't actually logged in to certify any of those underlying applications. I think especially when you're dealing with things as sensitive and potentially as delicate as databases, there can still be instances where the backup file has been created with no errors, but somewhere within there the underlying data ended up corrupted, and ultimately that backup file is unusable. Recovery assurance enables our customers and our users to proactively identify any issues there may be with restores from particular backups. And then the results of the recovery assurance test are viewable not only in reports, but the backups themselves will be marked and indicated that they have passed that recovery assurance test. You have confidence now in a clean, usable point of restore. So the results of this testing we not only see on our dashboard here, again, a great snapshot view, but we can drill down into our reporting for additional information. The first output is in the compliance report, again benchmarking recovery point and recovery time actuals against the tested profile. These reports, as well as a number of others, are easily exportable into a PDF or a CSV file. So you can put these in the hands of a compliance officer, business owner, director, whoever it might be that would benefit and needs that information. Here, for example, from within our sandbox environment, we've booted up those machines, executed the application scripts. We're well within our compliance standards. The longest, or the recovery time actuals on these machines, anywhere from about 5 to 9 minutes here, well within that 30-minute threshold. In our RPO actual, the last backups were taken a little under 8 and a little under 10 hours ago, so we're well within that defined 24-hour window for acceptable data loss. So we're meeting our compliancy regulations as they have been set, and you see the results of the application tests from the recovery assurance report here. I'm going to go back a ways because we do have some tests that have been failing. So I want to show you what that looks like in addition to a successful test here. Also exportable into a PDF or a CSV file here. Let's take a look at the results of a successful test here first. And again, where we're going beyond that screenshot verification, we start what we call our instant recovery process. This is leveraging appliance resources as a temporary data store so that we can inject the data directly into a share, into the virtual disk that's been mounted to the appliance, and then ping our target location to spin up the virtual guest. We'll then migrate the location of the VMDK or the VHD file to the target location leveraging storage vMotion with VMware or live migration with Hyper-V. So we're able to achieve those near zero RTOs, recovering virtual infrastructure with that instant recovery process. Something we use as a part of our testing, but also something that you can use to recover VMs in the event of guest failure. Reconfigure the VMs as specified, and then we're going to power them on. And first in our boot group was that AD server. Domain service, the NTDS database is intact, it is responding. We're going to be able to authorize and authenticate our users. Secondly here, our SQL machine comes up, the instance is intact, the database engine is running. And lastly, our web client is able to communicate with its back-end database. We are able to communicate with our SQL host here, and the IIS service is on and responding. We're going to be able to post our website. Once we've run through those scripts and executed those tests, we're going to power off the VMs, remove them from that instant recovery process, tear it down, and then update the compliance and the recovery assurance reports here. But where you do have failures, you'll be notified here, and there will be a description of where the errors had occurred. In this case, with AD, we were having errors, and the operation was timing out. We were having trouble connecting to our clients. But again, if a SQL query was not producing the expected output as submitted as part of the test, a particular service was not running, there were errors in restoring the VM because maybe VMware tools were not installed on the target here, you'd be notified proactively of any of those potential issues against the tests that you have scripted. So again, providing you with that visibility to remediate where things may be going wrong or where we may have the potential for failure, but also with those clean tests, understanding that the backups that we are creating are going to be usable and recoverable. It's that proof and confidence that's key for our users and really enables them with a lot of confidence. I know I've been using that word a lot, but it's very, very important. The whole purpose of taking backups is with the goal of recovery in mind, and recovery assurance is providing us that visibility. So hopefully you've been able to see how this is a little bit different and is going a layer deeper than that screenshot verification. And again, right up here on our dashboard, we can see the status and the results of some of those tests. Absolutely love that data copy access here. So again, as we had mentioned, proactively know the impact of an outage from a compliance standpoint, RPO and RTO, and understand where there are recovery issues. And again, just an example here, couldn't even boot this machine up. We were having issues with VMware tools, for example. As we had seen, an appliance had timed out. We were having trouble listing connections. But again, as you're defining those tests, you're simulating what that spin-up process is going to look like, so you can really orchestrate what this looks like for your machines to be proactive about it. And this is where, again, we've seen some improvements, but again, results from the Unitrends Cloud survey, there has been an uptick overall in testing and a reduction of the organizations that are not able to test, but still a majority are testing maybe once a year or not at all. Really, we would recommend, while it might not be feasible to test every single backup unless you've got a highly automated way to do it with like recovery assurance, but anytime a significant change or update is applied to the environment, you should be checking or testing that recovery to ensure that even older backups are still going to be compatible with new additions or new versions of the software. There's a great testing white paper on the Unitrends website. We would encourage folks to kind of check that out absolutely here. So as we've moved towards the end of the presentation and are about to get started for Q&A, I would like to offer the opportunity to the audience to submit a request for additional information. If you have questions or you'd like to talk to one of our experts a little bit further, please feel free to indicate here on the poll any additional follow-up information that you would like to see. We can provide you with that testing white paper, the recovery checklist, additional case studies about customers that have benefited or have made the transition over to Unitrends. If you'd like a full demonstration of the user interface, we'd be happy to work one-on-one with you, discuss how this might be a great fit for your environment, talk about the specific applications and the needs of your organization. We also have full-feature trial software that's available on our website. It's our Enterprise Plus Edition license, the Lamborghini of our software. We start at a Cadillac and kind of work our way up to the Lambo, but the full feature software is available from our website. If you're looking for potentially different ways to be doing things, please feel free. We can reach out, help you get that trial stood up. You'll work through with one of our evaluation engineers and ensure that the criteria for success is being met. So I'm going to open up the Q&A at this time here, and we'll kind of work through that. And I'm going to leave the poll open so that folks have a chance to respond. And again, kind of that last answer there, if you'd like one of our continuity experts to reach out and discuss things through with you, feel free to submit. And again, multiple choices should be accepted here, so hopefully I had configured this correctly, but you should be able to submit multiple responses if you'd like information or follow-up in a couple of different ways. So I'm going to leave this open and take a look at some of the Q&A that's come in on the line here. So some questions here. First question here from Mike, and Mike is wondering, is recovery assurance available with all software editions? And Mike, recovery assurance is an Enterprise Plus feature, so you would be able to, even with that trial licensing, configure recovery assurance from your local site or local environment. We have a question here from John, and John is wondering, when it comes to the Unitrends appliances, how large of an environment can you fit on the appliance? So John, mileage will vary a little bit with those, but the Recovery series offers 15 models. They scale from 2 to 120 terabytes of usable capacity, and there are a number of sizes in between. But again, the Recovery series, you'll be leveraging compute and storage that we are delivering. If you have existing compute resources and secondary storage, you can use that Unitrends virtual appliance to provide your environment with the same levels of protection. The great thing about our appliances, both physical and virtual, is that they are all in one. Your data reduction, your compression and deduplication engines are built in. You don't need a secondary storage or something like an exagrid for dedupe. We typically see 10 to 1, 12 to 1 on average. Again, mileage will vary, but we have seen data reduction as high as 20 to 1 in some cases. Reporting as well, and some of that testing, again, is all built in. You don't need to stand up a proxy server, an additional database on the back end of it. It's all coming prepackaged and pre-tuned with that appliance. Follow-up from John here. You had mentioned Recovery series appliances can protect the entire environment. Which applications specifically do you have that granular protection for? And we have agents, John, for Exchange, SQL, Oracle, and SharePoint. But that's a great question, and if folks out there are wondering kind of what Unitrends supports here, you can search for the Unitrends Compatibility Matrix. If you just search your search engine, Google or something like that, for Compatibility Matrix, you can see all of the available operating systems, versions here, functionality that's going to be supported, applications as well, where for Exchange, for example, we're going to enable you with that application level backup. For other applications, your hypervisors here, supported versions. So if you're wondering if Unitrends would be a fit for an aspect of your environment, you can certainly feel free to check out the Compatibility Matrix online to make sure that when we talk about being able to protect things all in one, that we are going to be able to do so. So lastly here, as we're working towards the end of the session, and again, any questions that are coming in, please do feel free to submit any last minute here. I'm going to post some links here in the chat for folks to, if they'd like to follow up or take advantage here. Our toll-free sales line and our company contact information is going to be posted here. I'm also going to include the unexpected or the hidden risks checklist. Folks can kind of check that out here to see if your kind of best practices or processes today are in line with what some of us recommend. And again, requesting a demonstration, you can also do that through that live demo link. And you know what, since we just had it up, I'm also going to pop in the compatibility matrix so folks can feel free to grab that and bookmark that as well if it would be useful or helpful for folks. So at this point here, it looks like we have a couple of minutes that I can give you back in your day, but I really appreciate everyone who came out to join us today. And again, continue to follow unitrends.com/events for upcoming series in the webinars. I apologize again for being a little bit coy. There's only so much that I can say at this time, but especially when it comes to the automated remediation of some of these software issues, I would really encourage you to follow the series here as we start to move towards the end of the year. I'm going to be able to lift the fog in some of that mysticism here. So again, please feel free to submit any questions. I've also put my email address up on the screen here. If you do have any questions, would like to reach out, you don't see that recording come through from WebEx, please feel free to drop me a note or chat in. I'd be happy to assist however I can or get you routed in the right direction. So at this point here, we'll be kind of winding things down. So I really appreciate, again, everyone that joined us today. We thank you for your participation. And again, as the title implied, keep an eye out on your inbox. 5 of our attendees here today will be entered into a raffle to receive one of 5 $100 Amazon gift card prizes. So with that, my name was my name is Phil Adam Margette. I'm a technical specialist here with Unitrends, and we thank you so much for your time. Have a great rest of your day, and have a great weekend coming up ahead. Thank you so much.